Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, so I suppose we shall start this webinar for Bioeconomy Ireland Week. Thank you, everybody that is starting to join us. And thank you beforehand to all the guest speakers and collaborators within this event. And let's get rolling. So, just a few reminders. We are recording this event. I don't think you have permissions to share your screens and microphones just yet, but please try to not open them if you are able. And if you have any questions throughout the event, please write your questions in the Q&A box. And I know you can also raise your hands, but please leave that for the end of the event, where we are going to have a Q&A session and a discussion sessions amongst our guest speakers. So I don't know if you all know about the InformBio project or not, but we have here in your screens 2 QRs. One, the green one for the InformBio project website, where a lot of information is stored and you can go there and read. And also we have a black QR in the right side of the screen where you can subscribe to our newsletter. Don't worry, they're going to leave now the QRs, but they will pop out throughout the presentations. So don't worry if you cannot scan them just yet. So this is our agenda for the day. It's very complete. We are going to start with our first guest speaker, Stephen McCormack from IRBA. He's going to talk about the role of and importance of the biochar. Then I will join back again and I will talk about a little bit about the InformBio project and about the biomass arising map for biochar in Ireland. Then our colleague George Bishop from University of Galway is going to talk about the environmental risk assessment framework they have developed within the InformBio project for Ireland with biochar as an example. Then our colleague Riju Kargupta from NTU as well is going to talk about the opportunities of biochar for the net zero transition and different applications for Ireland. And then we're going to have a short break because I don't want to tire you a lot. But after the break, one of the best part of the event comes. We have a couple of guest speakers. We have Bernard Carey from the Biomass to Biochar for Farm Bioeconomy project. This is an AP Agri project. And we have Hadil Al-Aidi from Grow Green Barn Blue project from NTU. And I believe this project, Grow Green Barn Blue project, is also done in conjunction with an industry, Downman, and I believe their partner, Robert Downdall, will also be in the audience during the discussions and the Q&A session. So without further ado, I think we all now have an image of the structure of the event, but I will be reminding of it throughout the event. But I think we can, I can leave the floor to my colleague Stephen McCormack from IRBA, and he can start talking about the role and importance of biochar. Stephen, if you are there.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I'll just try and share my screen.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
So if you can just confirm you can see.
We can see, not full screen yet. There we go. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so hi to all, and thanks to Carmen and the InformBio team for inviting me to open this event as part of Bioeconomy Ireland Week. So Stephen McCormack is my name. I'm project executive with IRBA, the Irish Bioenergy Association. and I'm chiefly responsible for working on our Interreg Northwest Europe projects, which have all been centered around the production and use of biochar. Now, in the 6 years I've been working in the area, I've actually seen it rapidly develop from where it was not very commonly thought about or talked about. But in recent years, we've seen more and more people taking notice, becoming involved, or even investing or starting businesses within this sector. Now, so just a quick note about InformBio for those of you who don't know who we are. We're a membership organisation representing the bioenergy sectors here on the island of Ireland. And we cover the areas of biomass, biogas and biomethane, biofuels, energy crops, wood fuels, and in more recent years, the emerging biochar sector. We also have a seat on the National Bioeconomy Forum, and indeed many of our members are actually actively involved in the various elements of the biomass supply chain, which, as we know, is complementary to the developing of a bioeconomy. We're involved in policy, lobbying and advocacy, as well as working in a number of funded research and demonstration projects, including EIP, Just Transition, and indeed the Interreg Northwest Europe projects I'm involved in. Now, if you're interested in finding out more or becoming a member yourself, then you could visit our website, urbia.org. Now, and given that the topic for today is just about biochar and the bioeconomy, I just wanted to highlight a few of our members who are actively involved in the biochar space. Pictured here are just some of them, and they range from technology providers, biochar researchers and analytics, biochar bulk producers, indeed biochar end users. So we have the likes of Cutting Edge Analytics with Salignus Analytical. We had the Irish Steam Preservation Society run their annual steam rally this year in Stradbally entirely on biocoal. We have members exploring feedstock like willow and hemp for biochar production. And we ran a national biochar conference back in May, and there was a huge level of interest on the day. And in fact, since I get contacted fairly regularly. And then just last week, we had our national bioenergy conference, which for the first time featured 2 speakers on the agenda who are related to this sector. So we heard from Sebastian Manhart of Carbon Future, and also Kathleen Draper of the International Biochar Initiative. Now, actually, yesterday we facilitated a site visit for Kathleen to visit Origna Fuels, who are actually currently installing 2 new reactors for biochar production. And by the time they come on stream, they'll actually have the largest throughput capacity by a country mile throughout the whole of Europe, which is very impressive. We also visited Artichar Ireland in Strokestown, where we heard how they're using their biochar almost exclusively to produce peat-free growing substrates for a horticultural and mushroom industry. So 2 emerging biochar players within the northwest of Ireland. So bringing it back to Kathleen and the International Biochar Initiative. So biochar's ability to help us to draw down atmospheric carbon. So pictured here, fresh off the press, so to speak, is a scientific paper which was published last week and was commissioned by IBI. Which shows research into conservative estimates the role biochar could play in carbon dioxide removals per any given individual country's overall emissions. Now, conservatively, it indicates Ireland could feasibly lock away between 2 and 4% of our annual emissions with the rollout of a biochar industry here. Kathleen also mentioned she'd be keen to see a country develop a biochar decarbonisation roadmap based on more in-depth knowledge of the 4 locally available feedstocks. So agri, forestry, manure and wastewater treatment sludges is what that paper looked at. And so I'd encourage you to have a read of the paper and maybe reach out if it's of interest. We also had a really good complimentary presentation from Sebastian Manhart. So he's Senior Policy Advisor with Carbon Future. Now, presentations of both will be made available to our website in the coming weeks, so I'd encourage you to watch them back because they're very, very interesting. But one thing that struck me, the emerging voluntary carbon removals market is developing rapidly, and it'll likely assist in the scaling up of an industry here and across Europe. But some of the key take-home messages were that biochar is ultimately it's a scalable, shovel-ready, and ready. It's already providing the vast bulk of actual durable carbon dioxide removal certificates that have been traded to date. Now, Sebastian took us through some of the numbers, the scale of the challenge, and how policy landscape is changing to include biochar carbon removals. So it's definitely worth watching back his presentation where we make them available. So when we talk about biochar production and its ability to sequester carbon, what do we mean exactly? So a report in 2018 by the IPCC identified 6 potential technologies that were capable of CDR or carbon dioxide removal at scale. And biochar was rightly identified as one of those. Now, there are technologies such as bioenergy carbon capture and storage, or indeed direct air carbon capture and storage we hear about. But the truth is they need to continue to see research and development and investment for them to be deployed at scale. reality is biochar is, like I said, shovel-ready, scalable, and is already doing the heavy lifting in terms of carbon removal from the atmosphere. Some biochar practitioners, I've heard them describe the process as reverse coal mining. So I think it's an extremely useful way and an analogy to think about what is happening when you make biochar and you use it to sequester atmospheric carbon. Now, just to bring it back to the bioeconomy side of things, and for the week that's in it, I just wanted to show you, within the short time that I have, our recently produced project video, which will do a much better job than I can within the short time to explain how biochar can be used to surface a bioeconomy. So hopefully you'll be able to see and hear this. It runs for about 5 minutes, so I'll just press play.
Annually, 37 million tonnes of residual biomass are wasted in northwest Europe, which corresponds to a potential of about 2% of total CO2 emissions in northwest Europe. The use and conversion of these waste biomasses into biochar is thus becoming an important strategy in the fight against climate change. In biochar, carbon can be stored for the long term. It can replace fossil coal and be processed into other products. This makes biochar the basic material of a circular carbon economy, which not only has a positive climate effect, but can also lead to sustainable economic and social development. However, the circular carbon economy is more than just a purely technical solution. It requires a well-thought-out, preferably local management concept in which 4 central elements and process steps are optimized and coordinated with each other. Biowaste is organic waste from private households, cities and municipalities, from gardening, forestry and agriculture, and residual biomass from nature conservation areas. This biowaste includes, among other things, green cuttings and hedge trimmings, roadside greenery, food scraps and residual wood. Biomass management here includes collection, transport, storage and pre-treatment of the biomass. Biomass is converted into biochar in pyrolysis furnaces in the absence of oxygen. This prevents the carbon from going into the air as CO2 and instead being stored in the coal. Pyrolysis produces thermal energy, pyrolysis gas and coal, which are used in the various plant systems in different quantities and qualities.
The technological range begins with simple Contiki kilns, through small rural plants that fit well into local heating networks, and ends with high-tech carbonisation plants on an industrial scale, for example as components in urban waste treatment and sewage plants. Plant design and management are determined by the regional framework conditions, the availability of biomass input, the intended heat or coal production, and the targeted biochar quality.
Biochar is the ideal feedstock for bioeconomy products and services. It has outstanding properties for water and nutrient binding and can be used in various industries. It is active in the filtration and purification of water and wastewater and can be used as a valuable soil substrate for gardening, agriculture and forestry. They are used as bedding in stables and for the reduction of odour nuisance in various industries, from medical technology to sanitation, and as an aggregate in the construction industry, clay plaster, concrete and asphalt. A sustainable carbon circular economy should be strategically planned. It makes sense to base this planning on necessary development scenarios, for example, climate-neutral urban planning, sustainable water management, water storing and heat-resistant cities. Promoting biodiversity, extensification of land, and for sustainable agriculture. The circular carbon economy must link all 4 areas in a sustainable way and implement them locally, based on the available biomasses, optimal plant design and biochar qualities. Product and value chains for the regional bioeconomy are being developed. It offers opportunities not only for climate protection and economic value creation, but also for socially and participatively oriented regional development in Europe.
Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that and you have now a better understanding of how we see these value chains and frame conditions at play. So as a sector, it can be quite wide and varied, but just some of the examples of the products and services that were explored within that video can be found on our project website, 3c.eu. Now, 3c.eu has recently finished up. We will actually maintain the website for the duration of the next project, which is called Cascade, and that'll actually bring it to 3 successive Interreg Northwest Europe projects that have had a chance to build upon each other, the learnings of the previous projects, but also the network of stakeholders that have built up, which within these programs doesn't often happen. So it's obviously a developing sector. It's very good to see. Now, if we can bring it back to the availability of feedstocks for producing biochar. So last year, InformBio were contracted by Department of Ag to explore sustainable, feasible alternatives for the management of cut agricultural green waste. And this was taken in light of farm-based exemptions coming to a close. In fact, following the 30th of November from this year, farmers will no longer be allowed to notify their local authority of their intention to burn cut agricultural green residues, and so they'll be looking for viable alternatives. Should a farmer wish to produce their own biochar on site, they should be allowed to do so. So obviously biochar was rightly identified as one potential feedstock, or one potential sustainable use of this feedstock, and there's likely to be a vast quantity of this material coming on stream. And so we think it should be captured and put to good use as a source of biochar. Now that study is available on the InformBio and the gov.ie websites, should you wish to read it. But just pictured in the top right there and featured in the report was a range of processing equipment at the farm scale, including simple flame cap kilns that are shown in the picture there on the right. But then equally, just to service farm-based production, pictured here is one of our newest members, Carbon Resources, who have begun manufacturing these simple kilns down in Cork, actually. So these are ideal for farm-scale production. Now, it's actually within agricultural, environmental and horticultural applications that personally I see the most potential for biochar and how it might be rolled out across Ireland. And that brings me neatly just to my last slide, just a brief update. So I mentioned the Cascade project, which will be our next 3-year Interreg Northwest Europe project looking at biochar. So briefly, just to touch upon it, we'll be closely working with stakeholders in Donegal as our pilot region. We'll be working with Kilulta, which is the home of the Northwest Bioeconomy Hub, along with Biocarbon Ireland, so consultancy and specialists in the biocarbon and biochar field. They will be our associated partners for the project as we try and work to turn Donegal into a pilot region to further explore biochar production and use. And in particular, we'll be having a focus on environmental, horticultural and agricultural applications. But we'll also be working closely with our partners across Northwest Europe, and they'll also be looking at various other scenarios which are listed there. So everything from wastewater treatment, combined heat and biochar production, construction and biomaterials, permeable or sponge cities, urban greening, and also looking at how social enterprises might interface with this emerging sector. Now, the idea is that we'll develop a recommender system that's adaptable for other regions and to regional conditions, which will then be shared with other parts of the country. So I'm looking forward to hearing how projects like the InformBio project might be able to assist in projects like this being successful. So thanks for your attention. I've only just barely scratched the surface of the possibilities in the time that I had, but I hope it just served as a brief introduction to the work InformBio and some of our members and project partners do both here and across Northwest Europe. Of course, if you wanted information or you want to get in touch or get involved, you can reach me at this email address. So thanks for listening. I'll hand you back to Carmen.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Very interesting. I wrote down a few notes because it's really interesting the number of projects you already have and how you are developing more research with biochar. So if you will stick, if you have time to stick to the Q&A, perhaps some people have some questions for you and we can all answer them. Thank you. Perfect. So we are going to move on to the next part of the event, and I believe that's my turn to speak for a while. So I'm going to be talking about a little bit of the InformBio project. I'm presenting you some of the biomass arisings mappings we've done for Ireland, focused mainly to the biochar production. But before I delve into any details, I want to let you all know that our colleague our partner from the InformBio project, Jesko Zimmerman, he works for Chagask, and he has developed a study map with the details, most of the details that we are going to present from the InformBio project today. And if you have any peculiar curiosity from any of the details, you can go into this study map. This is the QR, but I will show the QR also later on. And this is at the top of the slide. There's a study map link, and you can go there to revisit some of the details. So brief words about the InformBio project, because I know you all know probably already about the InformBio project, but also in the website, there's much more detail that I'm going to delve into today. So we are a DAFM-funded project that is going to last for 4 years, and we are 4 Irish partners: MTU, Chagask, University of Galway, and the Central Statistics Office. So the project will try to support preparations for a bioeconomy observatory for a sustainable and circular bioeconomy in Ireland. We will be developing many outputs, and among them, we are going to produce a bioeconomy foresight analysis, a biomass mapping, a value chain analysis, and a scenario modeling, and of course, in the end, all of these will generate a prototype of a national bioeconomy monitoring system. But among these outputs, today, we are going to talk specifically about 3 of them, 3 of these outputs: the database of biomass arisings, the BioEra framework developed by University of Galway, which is an environmental risk assessment framework, and the catalog of bio-based technologies, also developed by NTU. So, in order to let you know how you could use our outputs, we have created an example of how to use them in combination with the example of biochar, which is the main topic today, biochar. So I'm not going to delve into what is biochar again, because Stefan has explained a lot, and I believe my colleagues later will explain more details about biochar. But what I'm going to talk about is which biomass could Ireland use for biochar making? Which biomasses are already produced in Ireland that could be used for biochar? Well, first we need to do a little bit of research and look into which biomasses will be the best for biochar making, and looking into some papers. Here's some of the papers I've been looking into. They say that lignocellulosic biomasses, or in other words, wood-like biomasses, will be ideal. Another type of wood-like biomasses will be energy crops like willow or miscanthus. But also, some studies have shown that non-lignocellulosic biomass could also be used as biochar. However, there's a potential environmental risk because they tend to have higher concentration of heavy metals. So, to play safe, we've chosen the wood-like biomasses, or lignocellulosic biomasses, to show you how our outputs could be used for biochar, for this example of biochar making. So looking into our big database, we said, okay, we are going to see which of these have more lignocellulosic content, because in our database, we also store biochemical composition of the biomasses. But not only that, we also store volumes. And looking at all of these factors, we said, okay, let's pick some of these to see which of them will be more environmentally sustainable. And George later will tell you which of these will be more environmentally sustainable. So we've picked wheat grain, wheat straw, lodgepole pine bark, the bark of the pine, lodgepole pine needles, and needles are the leaves of pines, and the wood from Sitka spruce trees. And you all know that Sitka spruce is the tree that is most abundant in Ireland for wood industry. But let's see if using that wood will be environmentally sustainable. And these are the tons that we have stored, estimated to be produced in Ireland yearly for these specific biomasses. And as I said before, you can go into the study map Jesko Zimmerman has produced and look into these details. We also have county level detail there. Here are some of the maps we have developed with the database information. So what I'm showing you here is wheat production. And what you can see is that wheat is usually grown and harvested to the east side of the island because the soil quality is better. So they tend to grow more wheat and other crops to the east side of the island because of the soil quality, and the other side of the island for grass and grass-fed livestock, for example, or forestry. And we can see that here because here in this map, we show you the lodgepole pine distribution, potential harvest, and we see is potentially more distributed to the east side of the island. And also the wood processing plants and the conifers plants, Sitka spruce is a conifer as well, are also usually distributed to the east side of the island, west side of the island, because of these soil quality properties. So if we want to go and look for these biomasses, we need to know where they are. And these maps show you where they are and the volume of these biomasses. And again, more details can be consulted here in this story map. So now, the big question will be, will these biomasses be environmentally sustainable for biochar making in Ireland? Well, I will let George Bishop explain this to you. Thank you. George, if you want to start.
Thanks, Carmen. I'll just share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we see the screen.
Excellent.
And now it's full screen. Perfect. Thank you, George.
Excellent. Thanks, Carmen. And hi, everyone. I'm George Bishop. I'm a postdoc researcher at the University of Galway, and I'm attached to the InformBio project as a life cycle assessment analyst, mainly. So today, as Carmen mentioned, I'll be introducing our BioEra framework, which is a new tool for assessing environmental risks in the bioeconomy. And we'll illustrate its use through a few case studies for the biochar feedstocks that Carmen mentioned just now. And hopefully leave you with a new way of thinking with our complex thoughts here. So to realize the environmental potential of the bioeconomy and ensure its long-term viability, it is crucial to achieve environmentally sustainable production. Life cycle assessment, or LCA, is a common method to assess the environmental impact of a product or service throughout its life cycle. See here from raw material acquisition, manufacturing to use to end of life. So life cycle assessment, LCA, helps us understand the broader environmental consequences of our choices, where we model things like the transportation as well as the life cycle stages, as well as potential, new lives, reuses, recycling, all the inputs to all our life cycle stages, and then calculating our outputs, which can then be amalgamated into an overall environmental impact score for individual processes, activities, or here, as we see, for a full life cycle. So a typical life cycle assessment called an attributional LCA focuses on attributing environmental impacts to specific processes or activities. It's a static assessment that looks at the environmental impacts of a particular activity at a specific point in time, giving us a footprint, which you might have heard before, for example, like a carbon footprint. Whereas consequential LCA is a different type of life cycle assessment, and this aims to describe how environmentally relevant flows will change in response to possible decisions, considering the broader system-wide consequences of changes in activities. So it takes into account the ripple effects that changes in one activities can have on the entire system. So for example, here with land use change, here we could see the direct impacts that would be covered, say, in attribution LCA of land use change. So if we have currently have a food crop and we want to change it to energy crop, so the direct land use change would just be converting from food crop to energy crop. Environmentally, when we model that probably wouldn't have too much of an environmental burdens, really. I mean, you just change it from one arable crop to another. There's not going to be too much risk here. But when we consider these ripple effects throughout our economy, we have something called indirect land use change. So we have our direct land use change of food crop to energy crop. But should the demand for this food crop still exist, as kind of land is constrained, it's limited, and that food crop still remains, it's going to have to be developed elsewhere in the world. And then there'll be some kind of land use change to grow that food crop, typically on the natural frontier. So there's all these ripples throughout the economy. So not all bio-based feedstocks, so feedstocks meaning raw materials, are environmentally equal, as feedstocks can incur vastly different upstream impacts, both directly and indirectly, generating potentially massive burdens before any product is even made. Thus, understanding the environmental impacts of bio-based feedstock production is essential to ensure sustainable expansion of the bioeconomy. However, given the increasing innovations within the bioeconomy, conducting full consequential life cycle assessment for every possible production scenario of every prospective feedstock for potential bio-based products is unfeasible, especially due to resource constraints. So kind of within our study, we've utilized the principles of consequential LCA thinking, kind of this rebound effects, to develop a methodology which enables rapid environmental screening of potential bio-based feedstocks, facilitating an early assessment of upstream environmental risks, which we call the BioEra framework. The BioEra framework aims to identify possible areas of environmental concern associated with an increased demand for any bioeconomy feedstock. It covers 7 environmental aspects, these being finite resource inputs, greenhouse gas emissions, air quality, water quality, ecosystem diversity, terrestrial carbon storage, and indirect land use change, which I just mentioned. So to very briefly explain how this works, the environmental risk scoring system is based on 2 key factors, the probability and the severity of environmental impact. So these are each assigned a rank of low, medium, or high based on explicitly defined criteria. These scores then provide a risk score of 1 to 3 for each environmental aspect, denoting low to high risk, as we can see on the right there. So by totaling the scores for all 7 aspects which we saw, this approach yields like an overall score relating to the potential environmental risk associated with increasing demand for each bio-based feedstock. So severity of environmental impact is associated with the potential magnitude of the consequences arising from an increased demand for a particular feedstock. So we provide the criteria for the 7 environmental aspects, which can guide practitioners to estimate the severity level associated with the increasing demand for this feedstock. I won't go into too much detail here, but as we can see here for one of the environmental aspects, we provide a flexible framework for evaluating the environmental risk of bio-based feedstocks based on structured qualitative descriptions that can be implied even in cases where data might be limited. So in the BioEconomy framework, we link product type of bio-based feedstocks to the probability of environmental risk. There's some heavy consequential thinking here, but as simply as I can make it, consequential LCA tracks a product's environmental impacts forwards in time using production systems that can adapt to changes in demand. So these are known as unconstrained suppliers. In that thought, determining products can adjust their production based on demand, while byproducts are limited by the demand for the determining product. For instance, suppliers of beef won't increase meat production in response to increased demand of leather, for example. So constrained products won't respond to demand changes. Instead, less of that constrained product becomes available for other parts of the economy, potentially leading to higher productions from other unconstrained suppliers offering similar products. It's quite abstract, quite hard to get your head around, but hopefully I'll show later with a few scenarios which might make it a bit clearer. And so wastes are essentially co-products that have no value, so they won't impact any kind of production levels of anything when demand increases. So although it really is sensitive to specific biomass production scenarios, but here we demonstrate how the BioEconomy framework can be followed to explore this potential risks of increasing the demand for the 5 selected feedstocks Carmen discussed earlier. So if we kind of zoom in here, so if we have an increased demand for wheat grain, so wheat grain is a determining product. It's the main product coming from the wheat crop. So if we increase the demand, we're going to increase our wheat crop production. So this is going to have some finite inputs such as fertilizers, seeds, machinery, harvest, which will have some environmental release to the atmosphere, to water, to soil. So this wheat crop is going to require some land, which requires some direct land use change, at least in this scenario that we've come here. For Ireland, it's almost certainly probably going to be coming from some form of grassland. So there's going to be some conversion of grassland to arable land, where we have a risk of some considerable terrestrial carbon loss, but also some potential ecosystem diversification if we're moving from grassland maybe. And as I mentioned earlier, potentially some indirect land use change if we're converting some of that grassland. So if the demand for the grassland, or should I say, whatever's using that grassland for still exists, say rearing animals, if we're removing that, we may, if the demand for that still exists, may have to then grow them elsewhere. And so, oh, sorry, I think my thing's just gone there. They might exist elsewhere. But on the other hand, if we look at wheat straw, for example, if we increase our demand for wheat straw, there's going to be less, it's not going to have any impact on wheat production. Just the value of wheat straw just isn't high enough to impact wheat production. What's going to happen is there's going to be less availability of that straw, for example, bedding or for feed, whatever that wheat straw was being used for. And so as there's less availability of that straw for those uses, the unconstrained suppliers to the market that were filling that feed or bedding will increase their marginal production from unconstrained suppliers to match that reduced availability. So there'll be some inputs and releases from there, as well as some land conversion of those unconstrained suppliers. I'm running out of time, so I'll hurry up a bit now. In a similar thought, Sitka spruce is a determining product. It's a main product. So if we want more Sitka spruce woods, we would get increased Sitka spruce production with some inputs and some release. Not too much actually for Sitka spruce, at least not as much as wheat would have, but still a few. We've got some direct land use change, again, probably from grass, some kind of grassland to forest land. Actually, the risk of terrestrial carbon loss here would be very low. If anything, it's probably going to be some kind of terrestrial carbon gain in the carbon stored in the above ground biomass and even the below ground biomass, and some diversification, and that indirect land use change again coming from that grassland. Lodgepole bark is quite similar to the straw we mentioned earlier. If we increase the demand for that bark, it's not going to impact on lodgepole production. There's going to be less availability of that bark. So the uses where that bark was going to, other suppliers to that market will increase their production to match that reduced demand. There might be some land conversion. And finally, lodgepole needles are typically a waste. They're typically left on the soil. So they're a waste, so they have no value. It's not going to impact any other markets. But if we're removing it from land where a certain percentage of these needles would have sequestered into the soil, there's going to be potential risk of some terrestrial carbon loss here. So when we follow the framework, these are the results of potential environmental risk. So where we can see that wheat grain carries great risk, whereas the needles carry the least. So again, these results are highly scenario specific, and these are just some example scenarios where we can show here the kind of consequential thinking. So the conclusion, so the BioEconomy framework supports decision-making along the value chain. It's definitely worth noting that high risk does not disqualify this feedstock as a use. In fact, all it does is places the onus on the stakeholders or the producers to develop these risk mitigation strategies to show that where high risk has been noted, that the risk won't occur, or to show that downstream potential benefits, such as the biochar has some enormous benefits, outweigh these upstream potential impacts. So I mean, similarly, low risk doesn't necessarily mean great. As we've seen, it's highly dependent on scenarios. So we've got a transparent documentation to report these risks to avoid any kind of greenwashing. We saw here that waste feedstocks were coming off the lowest risk, and that kind of makes sense with our current thinking, you know, developing a fully circular bioeconomy, reducing waste. I mean, waste is going to carry way lower burdens than, say, a primary feedstock is. So really, from this talk, if nothing else, I hope it's got you thinking differently about how we consider future effects, that everything will create ripples and rebounds for every decision we make. And there really is no such thing as a free lunch. So thank you very much for listening. And of course, a big thank you to my co-producers of this framework on the screen here. So yeah, thank you very much. And thanks, Carmen, for having me.
Thank you, George. Very, very interesting, very, very detailed. And there's always a thought on what to do with when something is already used. There's always an impact, isn't it? Thank you very much, George. I suppose you will be sticking around in the Q&A session. So yeah, if anybody has a question, he will be there. Thank you. So now moving on with the next part of the event. Before the break, my colleague Riju Kargupta, he will be talking about opportunities for the net zero transition and different applications for Ireland within the InformBio project. He is also the person who's developing the bio-based technologies catalog for value chain opportunities. So, Ryu, if you are there, you have the floor.
Yeah. Thanks, Carmen. I think I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, all of you. Thank you, Carmen, for introducing. I am Riju. I have joined the InformBio team, and I will be working on the work package 3 of them. So my colleagues have already introduced to the biomass feedstocks that will be available for the pyrolysis. So I will go through the technology and how it is helping Ireland for achieving circular economy and the net zero transition. So as you can see, biomass can be anything which is having lignin, cellulose, hemicellulose, which is having some sort of carbon. So at the end product, we want something charcoal or carbon rich. So the process of thermal decomposition of these materials, which is having an oxygen-free environment. So one of our earlier team members mentioned this because we want charcoal, we do not want the carbon to go out as CO2. And the temperature range is between 250 to 900. So there are various terminologies which are described here, like slow, fast, based on the temperature, time, pressure profile. Like if you want very fast pyrolysis, it will be less than 2 seconds. If you want slow, it will be around 1 hour. So yeah, and the yield will vary. So there will be 3 phases. So I will come to the next slide. So this is a biomass. So when you do pre-treatment of biomass, what are the factors you are playing with? You are playing with the particle size. You are playing with the moisture content, which will all impact the biochar yield. So in pyrolysis, you can control this. You can control these parameters like the heating rate, the reaction time, the gas flow rate, the temperature. So people have optimized this and found out some of the conditions which will be best for biochar yield. So again, biochar you can use it as many applications. So we will discuss that in the next slides. So here you have the how it contributes to the circular economy. So we have waste or secondary feedstock. You can treat them by, so these are of no value as such. So you can just treat them in a pyrolysis reactor, and then you get 3 phases out of it. You get the gas phase, you get the oil phase, and you get the solid phase as biochar. Now the yield will depend upon these factors like temperature, time, pressure, and the initial moisture content, initial particle size of the feedstock, and what are the applications you can get. Like you can use biochar as adsorbents for CO2 sequestration. So this is because of the porosity it has. You can use it as for physically absorbing particles or chemical adsorption. I will talk about it in the next slide. And obviously biofertilizer, because so when you apply this biochar in the soil, it doesn't allow the ammonia to get out. So you're giving more nutrition or more retention time for the soil. So in that way, it helps in fertilizer. So it avoids loss of these important elements in the soil. So that is the whole concept. Yeah, so why this adsorption concept came here? Because of the porosity. If you see charcoal, activated carbon, biochar, all are the different terminologies based on the end applications. So yeah, based on the porosity, it is terminated as microporous or mesoporous. So based on that, you can the functionality is basically adsorption. It can adsorb CO2, and it can also, the pristine biochar is not as sharp as if you do some sort of chemical or physical adsorption here. Like if you do some chemical modification to the functional groups, it is more more it will be more you will get a better surface area because of chemical adsorption, chemical change in the functionalities. So yeah, modified biochar has been extensively used for CO2 adsorption, but when you get the biochar as it is from pyrolysis, you need some sort of modifications, because here you can see that they have done a lot of studies, people all around the globe, like amine or alkaline metal impregnation, microporous. So basically you are playing with the surface area and you are chemically or physically modifying it for achieving your ultimate goal. So yeah, it has a good implication in cutting down the CO2 emissions. So that's exciting. This will be one of the slides here. It is showing the total summary of whatever my earlier colleagues and I have talked about. Like you can get the biomass from any source as long as it has carbon. You can get a biochar, and depending upon the upcycling rules, like you can some sort of activation you can do, some sort of surface modification also you can do after pyrolysis. So that will help you in your basically you're changing the functionalities, the texture, the elemental compositions, and also these are used as catalysts. So if you use it as catalyst, it will enhance your yield of, say, I have read some papers which have talked about increasing use of biochar as a catalyst, improving the biogas yield in AD plants. So yeah, it has wide applications, and as a biocatalyst, as also as a catalyst in liquefaction and pyrolysis, and for environmental remediation, which is of particular interest to us, is the air cleanup, and also in water purification, and also soil as biofertilizer. So it is in line with the SDGs which we have talked about. And yeah, and people are doing a lot of pilot scale study as our RBA member showed us. So yeah, you can do a lot of, and also George has spoken about LCA. So yeah, if you go to a pilot plant, these are all automated, and there is a whole lot of AI technology has been used here, and to do this study like LCA and TEM, so techno-economic assessments. So yeah, it has an implication in Ireland for achieving net zero emissions. So yeah, thank you. I wish to thank all of you for your active participation in the event. And my slides ends here. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ryu. I believe we've put the people with a lot of information already. So perhaps we can have a 5-minute break now and come back at 10:57, more or less. Keep with for the last and probably most interesting part of the event, because we are going to have a discussion of Irish biomass identification. We are going to showcase two projects here in Ireland from people that it's developing here in Ireland. So please don't leave yet. Just take a break, go for a cup of coffee, and come back to this interesting discussion. I see you in 5 minutes. Thank you. Hello again. Hi, Bernard. How are you?
Yeah. Can you hear me there? Yeah.
Yes, and we can see you. So, Bernard, if you want to start, you have the floor.
Okay. I'm just going to share my screen here. Just hold a second now. Okay, well, let's start.
Go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Bernard Carey here. I was the project leader of the Biomass to Biochar project. The slide there. I don't know what's going on here now. These things, slides, just give us a moment here now. Sorry. Let's do it in automatic mode. I'll start. I just used the normal screen. I don't know why that is doing that. I presume everybody can see that anyway there. You can see that, Carmen?
Could you perhaps zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, just it was clicking, it was going itself. It just sorry.
But perhaps you can click on the zoom on the right down corner of the screen, and you don't need to go on full screen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. See what you're saying. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I can go bigger here. Yeah. Is that okay? And it's gone a bit too small. Yeah, it's just the slides. I don't know what's going on. So I was the project leader of this project, Biomass to Biochar for Farm Bioeconomy. It was funded by the European Union through the Department of Agriculture and Marine. 4-year project. It's actually over at the moment. We're just finishing up the final report and the LCA, which I'll come to. But if I just go to, for me, where this all started was to go back many years ago, and I grew up on a farm in the Midlands, and like we use terms like bioeconomy and regenerative agriculture and agroforestry, and I just probably saw it a bit the wrong side of 50. I would have seen the end of all this sort of what was normal back then. The little cottage there was my father's home place. We lived in the house behind there, and every year we would cut the oats on the farm, and then it would be cut and then harvested, as you can see, with the thrashing machine. That's a picture from my home place, and that machine above it is the mill. And that straw then was used to retouch this house. It would be done every couple of years on stages because it's quite a big house. So we had the bioeconomy, and as everybody did back to 50 odd years ago or more, it was just normal. And it's just like so we're really modern days, in my opinion, we're just sort of reinventing the wheel of these things. But going back to the project, that brought me about this idea of producing down here in County Clare, where I live now. I was born in the Midlands originally. Was what to do with rushes. Rushes are widespread around County Clare and along the western seaboard, and are a problem. And there's a lot of resources spent every year trying to manage them. And that's where the concept of this mobile pyrolysis machine. I've been at BIOCHAR for over 10 years now in one form or another. So we came together through EIP. We got funding to produce a mobile pyrolysis machine. And basically, there's a bed of rushes in the tractor, and it was chopped and blown this conveyor belt behind me there into a hopper and then through the pyrolysis machine. So it was a mobile plant. And as I said, the project is now over. So we produced biochar from the biomasses we looked at was currently unutilized biomasses such as rushes, hazel, bracken, and furze. So if I go then to what biochar is, I don't think I need to go into that too much here now because that's already been covered. I think maybe Michael Viney there said that he best summarized it by saying that as a way of turning waste into a versatile and useful material, biochar seems to be a gift to the circular economy. And unfortunately, Michael is now dead, but that sort of summarizes how important it is to the local economy. It's a carbon farming solution, and it can be integrated into the whole carbon farming idea. And I just address those points now in the coming slides, how that can happen. So if we take, I'll just make a slide a bit smaller. If we take the carbon farming idea, sorry, it's going a bit wrong with me. Basically, these pictures depict what we would have done in our project. We would have cut rushes. That's the top picture with the tractor and harvest them. Then the next picture is actually bracken, furze, the next one, and then hazel. But there's always this sort of issue about food versus fuel, and then conservation and ecosystem services, and are you damaging, you know, by cutting material and harvesting, are you going to be? But the bottom picture shows how we integrate this into current agri-environmental schemes. We're here in an SPA. A lot of rushes for this project were harvested from this farmer. This picture, satellite imagery, you can see here. You can see the strips. That was for hen harrier SPA, and the idea was you would cut strips in the field, so you wouldn't just clear the field of rushes because it's an important habitat. So you're able to integrate this sort of ecosystems approach to the whole project of cutting the rushes, but you're also minded the conservation interests of the sites. In relation then to the biochar itself, again, some of this has already been touched on. What do you use it for? Because it's all right to produce it, but you know, some people say, what are you going to do with that? Because while a lot of us in this call probably know about it, a lot of farmers don't. So one idea would be to add a silage additive, feed additive, or bedding, or then manure, and then in turn it would go back into the soil and you get a sort of circular system going. So just in the coming slides, that I just address some of these things we looked into, because one of the issues, as I said, is we found is that you can talk about these things, but there's not much science studies done here in Ireland, and internationally some of them are quite limited. So people are a bit dubious. So we decided in this project to do mini trials, giving samples to various people from the production that the biochar, mainly focus on rushes, because rushes is the dominant, as I said, species here. As we did look at the others, but the main focus in a lot of the stuff we done was on rushes. The next slide then. So one of the ones, early on ones I done was and we followed up this with a trial in Salignus, was to put a biochar added to slurry in the tanks. And you can see the IBC tanks there, and we got 4 of them across. Basically that was run for several weeks. It was 2 months. And you can actually see, if you look closely in their tanks, you can actually see that they're bulging with the amount of gases produced. And what we found is that, as many people would know, not all biochars are the same and don't react the same. Basically, we ended up with showing that Juncus actually reduces the amount of gas being produced. Now, we couldn't determine what gas it was because it didn't have the methane measuring tool for that piece of equipment. So I just calculated the amount, measured the amount of gas being emitted by these tanks over the 2 months. And then where you go across, you see from Corliss, which is hazel, you got really no difference versus the control. We followed that up then in Salignus with a proper trial in their lab, and we got 33% reduction in there using just rushes. We didn't try the other ones. We focused in on rushes. So then the next thing is, well, okay, that's slurry. What about other in ruminants? As I said, again, we hear a lot of talk about this, and there's a lot of research into seaweed. But just like seaweed, we found that not all seaweeds actually reduce the amount of methane being produced in ruminants. And then the lab scale trials, such as this one here, you actually get better results initially, but when you go into field trials reduce. So as you can see there, improves feed efficiency, reduces greenhouse gas emissions, absorbs toxins and pathogens, and improves the livestock housing environment. The trial we got carried out was in UCD, and where it wasn't conclusive that methane was reduced by adding, we tried spruce, bracken, and rushes. Of the 3, rushes looks the most promising. What I was told on the phones that we got 15 to 17%, but the error there is a bit on the high side, so it's 0.07, whereas we'd like that to be lower, 0.5 or so, 0.05. So for that reason, that trial is going to rerun again in the apparatus that you see here. So like a lot of research, you need further work. The other area, the other thing then we done in our study was then, well, how much rushes, because people say, well, there's not a lot of rushes, or there isn't, particularly where, depending on what part of the country you're in, you might think that there's not much rushes around, but actually there's quite a bit. So we carried out a survey of 125 farmers, and as you can see there, like 46% had some rushes, 2 to 5 hectares, and I'd scale you some people with 35 hectares. And the main, what we're finding was that people are managing these rushes. And this is important because you're not trying to ask people to redo something, like to go out and start a new process. They're already spending money. They're already spending money on cutting the rushes. So it's not a big step for them to go and do something else. In fact, it's not unusual to see rushes cut and baled and just left to rot on the side of fields. And then to the blue chart over here, the side which is based on some Chaga's paper, just extrapolating from that, you can see that they're actually foregoing, by not harvesting rushes, they're foregoing heating oil equivalent, and actually with biochar that could be produced. So they're letting this material, they're letting the carbon be released, they're foregoing the opportunity to actually generate heat from this, which is what most of this rushes will be turned into heat, and biochar production. In our own case, then it was like, so what products then did we produce? It's called European innovation. So this is probably where the innovation bit came in. On the left there, the picture, you have a picture of the rushes just raw in a crate. Then you have them chopped, which is a product in itself. It's a bit more useful than that. Hammer mill is another process. It could be more useful. There you got briquettes, pellets. You got biochar made from chopped rushes, and torrefied, which could be acted as a fuel. I'll come back to this other one. The carbon block is another one. Then there's a lot about growing media. These are the trials I've done myself to grow plants. We also done just with one of the school here. As I said, we sent out samples to many different people during the course of the project. One was to a local Liston school to go into young scientists. So they carried out some trials and that. They weren't exactly conclusive. This is one I done, but their one wasn't quite conclusive. They didn't show the same results that I have here. Basically, what this tube is showing that you get by coating the urea in biochar, you get a reduction in ammonia emissions versus just normal urea. So you get better use of your urea. This is the sort of thing that could possibly be done at a farm scale. Another part of this project too is like, Manny, you're constantly you're trying to get the idea out. So there was a call for expert evidence in the climate action plan. So we made a submission to that. And like one thing I know, and that was that there's a lot of talk about CCS in there but very little information on CDR. It seems to be not addressed, which is what biochar is, like a CDR. So then again, back to then what, as I said, things we made and studies. Going back to the carbon block, we submitted a sample of biochar made from rushes to the University of Limerick, and basically they found that the addition of the 4% rush led to an increase in the flexure and split strength of the biochar of the block. So the other thing is that by adding biochar to the block, you can get basically make the block effectively carbon neutral by adding 20%. Now that may not be possible in practical sense, but this particular research is going to be followed up again this year. From what I understand, they're looking for another sample to move on from there to look into it, to seek and narrow it down and see how good it is. So there's good. You can actually sequester the actual char in the block and improve the quality of your concrete block or whatever piece of structural concrete it would be. Another aspect was even more high tech. Was a sample was sent for analysis into its supercapacity. Now, it's not something I know anything about other than to see a possibility of it, particularly because it's renewable. You can see there that it has possibilities there. In another trial we done then was the wash effect on growth. We also made some there to Stephen there with Morris DC, and he got some positive results using the rush biochar too. But here's one I done myself. But basically, rather than going into spending a lot of time on this, the gist of this is the blue, the darker, the purple is the control. The other one is actually it's where the biochar was added, and the general trend is there where biochar was added to the compost, you got better growth rates. And that again was now made from rushes. So they were down there at the bottom, you got different rushes that were made by different sources, and two different people, BC, me, and another person there made some too. Just compare, was it different? The results going to be much different. Again, more work to be done on all this, but it gives a good indicator there are possibilities. Now, the life cycle was mentioned earlier, and this is a key finding of our project, and a lot of work has gone into this, what you see here in front of you. So was life cycle analysis basically cradle to grave, assessment of the impact of producing. This was already addressed earlier. So we used EcoVent software, and we used various sources. We use our own project data, Irish papers, and then European. And so we created 8 scenarios here, and we looked into them to see what were the situation, what happens if in the different scenarios. First scenario there is you do nothing, you just leave the rushes as they are, and you get 36 kilos of CO2 equivalent, global warming potential, I should say. So you get a positive. So you're not sequestering any carbon, but it's not that big of a deal either, because you might say, well, just leave it. The other one was then cutting and baling them. And the reason it's a bit higher, because again, this figure is higher because now you're putting effort into diesel and machinery to go and bale them. But what happens if you cut and bale and convert them into rushes? You can see you now have a negative figure, global warming potential. You got minus 404 kilos. So that just proves a point that you're actually better off cutting these rushes and turning them into biochar to just leaving them there. Now, if you apply again, if you just apply that biochar to the soil, you get a minus 397 kilos CO2 equivalent. So again, that is well worth doing. Then 5 and 6 effectively are the same thing, but except one is you have your standard slurry practices, and you can see there you have slurry just spread, and you're positive. But if you add 10% biochar to it, you get a reduction, and you're down to 197 kilos of CO2. And the last two again are one where you just apply to land, or the slurry, you apply this slurry to land without biochar, and again you can see the figure is massive. Whereas you added biochar to it, you get a decrease. You're down to 3,734. So in relation then to the opportunities for all this in the biochar, what can be done with it? There's an increasing awareness on the impact of herbicides, particularly MCPA and water quality. And indeed, glyphosate is also, it's widely used to control rushes. And the EU just recently didn't pass the approval of the glyphosate, and now that'll probably will go through the next round, who knows. There's also sudden awareness of the energy needs, and this is an opportunity to turn, pyrolysis, and for instance, you've got biogas there, which was little spoken about 18 months ago, but maybe pyrolysis and gasification could be the same thing in a few years' time. Biochar is now recognised as an EU fertiliser. You got the banning of green waste burning at the end of next month, I think it is, or it's the first next month. You can't burn anymore. You can't. So Stephen already addressed that, and they're working that. So now you can actually turn that into biochar. You got the EU certification framework for carbon removals, and biochar has mentioned this several times. You got land rewetting. This is a big thing now, particularly up to Midlands, where you got counties like County Offaly, which is 21% peat, and rushes are a polluted culture species, and these thrive in these type of soils, so there could be an opportunity there. Brussels, European Union has also agreed to, as far as the marshes, to be other carbon sinks, so there's more opportunities. So there's a lot of opportunities that weren't there up to quite recently. So it would be great if we could develop a results-based system which might be part of a bigger agri-environmental scheme such as acres, where biomass could be managed and grasslands could be harvested and converted into biochar as a payment for every tonne of biochar produced within the European certification rules. The idea here is that maybe you could export the ecosystem services, for want of a better word, from the west to the east coast, so the farmers in the east coast could buy the biochar made from rushes here over this side of the country and add it to slurry and reduce their emissions. So I'm coming near to the end now. So all that we said is we're going to need a bigger machine, because the one we had was simply a pilot scale plant. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernard. I really loved that long slide. Made me laugh really good. Very interesting, very detailed presentation. I have a couple of questions for you, but before going ahead to that discussion, perhaps we need to leave the floor for our last speaker, Hadil Alaidi from the Grow Green Barn Blue project. And we'll come back with questions later.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you. Can you share your screen, Hadil?
Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you very much.
So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Hadil Alaidi. I am an MTU postdoctoral researcher working in the CERC Bio group under the supervision of Dr. Helena McMahon. on the Grow Green Burn Blue projects for our industry partners, Downman, with their project lead, Robert Dowdot. And Robert is here with us today, so he'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So Grow Green Burn Blue project is funded by SEAI with MTU and CODEMA partnership. So the project is mainly focused on productions of intermediate bioenergy carriers from non-forestry biomasses to be used in renewable and district heating, and also value-added chemical using pyrolysis. So firstly, what is pyrolysis? I know a lot of you have mentioned, but I just go quickly for definitions. So biomass for energy has generally been achieved via direct combustions, and this can be seen from the fire triangle and its three main components: fuel, heat in the presence of oxygens that produce a thermochemical reactions, releases heat and stored into fuel. What's more interesting is what happened when oxygen has been removed from the equations. Applying heat to a fuel such as biomass without the need of oxygen. This will initiate the same thermochemical reactions without resulting in combustions. This is what's pyrolysis. And pyrolysis causes the biomass to break down and separate into three main components: the solid char, and then the liquid oil, and then the syngas. And all of these referred to as IBCs. So this is just an overview of the whole project. So Downman is a national industry example of a company that's developing a technology that's capable of advancing the bioeconomy in Ireland. And the Grow Green Burn Blue project focus on the commercializations aspect for novel bio-based products. So first, we're identifying non-forestry biomasses and quantifying it in Ireland and seeing its potential to be used for pyrolysis. Downman will be constructing and commissioning a continuous throughput pyrolysis machines that will be producing these IBCs, the oil, the char, and the syngas. So MTU will be looking at the extractions and the analysis of the bio oil into its various biochemicals, and also CODEMA will be evaluating the fuel against alternative and more renewable for district heating systems. And also the char will be tested while we are testing in MTU the oil, we'll be also testing the char for its chemicals and physical properties as a soil amendment. So the main objective of this project focus on the demonstrating ability of Ireland to generate renewable energy sharing heat at a scale by producing a domestic alternative, IBC's alternative to imported biomass. And at a national level, this project will contribute approximately 70% per year reductions in the overall greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and achieving a net zero emissions by 2050. Currently, Ireland's generating a shared in heat of 300 kilotons per year, and this will be raised up to 398 kilotons by 2030. It will also inform the rollout of district heating options for policymakers and also creating jobs in the bioeconomy with a wide geographic spread across Ireland. So what's next in our project is, as you know, in pyrolysis, once you're heating the basic biomass into high temperatures, there is multiple reactions that take place that break down the cellulose and the hemicellulose and the lignin of these biomasses, and it produces the bio-oil, the biochars. And the bio-oil contains over 300 different compounds that will be fractionated into its sugar fraction, lignins, and other extractive, and identifying a high value chemicals that can be used as a bio-based product or biofuels and bioenergy. So these are just some images of the green waste blends, and these are just some gas bags containing syngases. These are the oil at different temperatures and conditions, and these are the biochars. So depending on the process of the pyrolysis, we're changing the resistance time of the biomass and the temperatures. The energy content of these IBC is either increased or decreased. So what Downman is trying to do is to evaluate the most beneficial uses of these IBCs for energy purpose. Thank you. you can talk to us here, myself or Helena or Roberts, on these emails. Thank you, Carmen. That was quick.
Thank you, Adil. Thank you very much. So now I'm just gonna share this slide so people can be reminded that they can write any questions in the Q&A button. And perhaps now we have more or less 20 minutes of discussion. And I have a couple of questions for you, Adil, and for Bernard. And perhaps for continuity, I can address Grow Green Bamboo project first. I know, Adil, you are there, but also your colleague Robert from the Daman industry is also there. So I'm going to shoot a couple of questions to you both. Let me see if Robert could have permissions to open his mic. Robert, gonna give him permissions. There you go. So the question, so what are some of the benefits that may exist in implementing alternative biomasses as bioenergy, no, to achieve in Ireland this net zero transition? And after that, how can this support the development of bioeconomy?
Okay. Hi everyone. Well done, guys, on the presentation. It's been a very interesting morning. I learned a lot of things myself that I didn't even know what was going on, so I might follow up with a few of you just to learn a little bit more if that's possible. So to answer your first question regarding the benefits around using alternative biomasses, I think a lot of technologies have developed around the use of wood, and wood is quite a premium product. It has an awful lot of other uses, same as materials like hemp. There's so many other higher value use cases. It seems a shame to burn it or to use it for the production of products that are going to ultimately end up as energy, because energy is quite a low value competitive market. I think by using alternative biomasses, we maybe take pressure off those more valuable resources, and we're able to be more resource efficient, create value chains for these materials, create more circular economy, start supporting people who are actually growing these types of biomass or have these biomasses available to them. I also think that in terms of harvesting and energy inputs, by using alternative biomasses, we can reduce the carbon footprint. We can decrease the life cycle emissions. Like there's so many benefits to using alternative biomasses, because I think Bernard said it, not all biochar is created equal, and like that, not all feedstocks are created equal either. There are use cases that we need to evaluate and that we need to investigate further to identify what the best use cases are for the different biochars. Like, I mean, Bernard showed some data there regarding rushes versus juncus. You know, that's just one example of, you know, biochar inputs having an effect on the use case. So I think there's a much broader kind of body of work to be done around trying to categorize the biomass types that are used for the end use applications. And I suppose to kind of touch on your second question, which was kind of around the development of the bioeconomy, I think anything that we do to encourage and promote the use of biomass or alternative biomasses, and to bring those materials into the supply chain or onto the market, is a positive thing, because that will either offset fossil-based alternatives or it will create local jobs, you know, in the local economy that's more distributed. So I think that you know, there's a lot of benefits there. It could help the overall economy in terms of waste reduction, create opportunities to transform waste into valuable resources, and ultimately drive growth in more rural areas that are, you know, they're going to promote circular, sustainable jobs and a better use of resources. I hope that kind of answers your question.
I was muted. Absolutely, Robert. Thank you very much for that answer. I totally agree with you. We need to use alternative biomasses because, as our colleague George has said before, depending on the use of the current use of the biomasses, we will have an impact. So if we go for those biomasses that don't have already an use, it could have less impacts in the environment. And also delving into alternative biomasses, I would like to ask Bernard a couple of questions, perhaps similar questions, because of course you've given a lot of detail on Rush's utilization on biochar, which is very, very interesting. All this work you are doing in this EIP Agri project. And that's also leads me to think, so could we say safely that rushes could be used as an alternative biomass that will benefit Ireland for the net zero transition, specifically for biochar making?
Yeah, absolutely. Robert, I agree with what Robert said. And in fact, the truth is that most of us that are in this field and interest are all saying the same thing, but it seems to be we're in, as I say, an echo chamber. Yeah, for instance, like there's a lot of spruce out there. That's our primary biomass in Ireland, but there's a lot of uses already for it. I come from a part of the country. I grew up in a place where we had no rushes, but I came down to Clare and said, God, if you could only find some use for these rushes. And that was the idea of the project, just to see what we could do. As I said, some people say, one of the things I said, well, sure, they grow in wet places and you can't harvest them, and it's raining all the time in Ireland. But during the course of this project, the 4 years of running, every year there was an opportunity to harvest the rushes. You're obviously competing with other equipment at the same time to harvest the rushes. You know, people want to cut silage. Very few people cutting hay now. And that's another little thing, because people have sort of forgotten you need to sort of harvest them dry. You just can't cut them wet and hope to bale them. They'll all just go mouldy and they're useless. So that'll be harvested dry. But for instance, this year, like we've had one of the wettest summer, but June was one of the driest months we had in a long time. So there was plenty of opportunities to harvest rushes. They're widespread. They probably lend them. A good thing from maybe a rural development point of view is more like a cooperative type setup that would they would be more suited for, because I couldn't see a big company coming in and saying we're going to start harvesting rushes and that's going to be our main biomass supply for our plant. I also think we'd be talking about small scale plants, maybe 1-2 megawatts, which would probably be more acceptable to communities than big mega plants, you know, 12-15 megawatts, where people would immediately be afraid that, which is often the case when you talk about new plants, that you could start burning waste biomass in them, in the plants. So as a just transition, absolutely, because at the beginning, it's just amazing how, when I started the project and how things have changed. You know, like we now have it as it's recognised as a EU fertilizer, biochar, and it's now going to be integrated into the, looks like into the farm, carbon farming. It wasn't in an original document, but now hopefully that will be changed. So the opportunity is the cascade benefits to the ecosystem, like as I said, I might have got it across there, is not only people at the moment here are spraying the rushes, they're managing them just to control them. But and they're getting knocked out of that. They're using chemicals, which we don't want people to be using if you can avoid it. And they got the machinery. So it's not as if you're trying to ask them to grow a new crop. You're a marginal land. Again, if you go on the East Coast, you have huge opportunities. You can grow sugar beet, you can grow, which unfortunately we don't have anymore as crop, but you can grow maize, all these different crops. But over here, you're very limited to what you can grow. Tillage is virtually ruled out in a lot of these places, even hemp, very few places. And if there are good land, it's highly valued for agriculture, for dairying, particularly dairying, because they're the people that can get it. So the use of rushes as a crop, you know, I believe certainly has a place. And we've shown through the life cycle analysis, and we've developed, you know, the products in the project. These are all just small, obviously need a lot more work and need, you know, something like Chagas and research institutes to look into further, because as I said, there are anomalies there, such as the rushes. You know, they don't always, you know, I just saw there, I showed where spruce didn't work as well and rushes work better. So in all, biochar is the same. So that's probably, you know, an area that's sort of constrained, because you have to be able to prove for definite. You know, you can't just be selling snake oil, it has to work. But the research, a lot of it is there. Our LCA shows us that rushes, and as I said, the climate where a lot of people would say, oh, it's always raining. In my experience, living down here and in this project for the last 4 years, there are opportunities to harvest them that are relatively dry. They will still have to be pre-dried in a processing plant to get a consistent product. That's normal anyway. So yes, absolutely, I think there's a place for them.
Indeed, I agree as well. As you show that there's evidence, LCA evidence, that cutting brushes and then making them into biochar will be more.
And as I said, it's not a food versus fuel. And it's not about going in and destroying habitats. You can manage it, because there's a lot of people talk about, you know, we're here in the Bioeconomy Forum here talking about uses, and then you've got another group of people who want to do nothing. But we need these things. We can't be outsourcing everything. We're all living, and we all wear clothes. We get up in the morning, we do things, we consume as a society, and we need to be able to help get nature to help us do these. And this is just one example of maybe, you know, could be developed further, the rushes.
Absolutely, totally agree. So I'm seeing that there's a couple of Q&A questions for all the team here that has been speaking today. The first question we received was almost an hour ago, and I believe this could address Stefan. So Ryan Kennedy here is saying, are there any of the pyrolysis plants are operating in Ireland?
Yeah, so we have several operating in Ireland. Oddly enough, they're mostly clustered in the northwest region. So as I mentioned, the Rigna Fuels are on track to have the largest throughput capacity within Europe within the next couple of weeks. I was there yesterday, capable of potentially producing up to 28,000 tons of biochar per year, which blows most of the competition out of the water. We also have new up-and-coming companies who are one based in Claremorris, who are currently plumbing in their new reactor, and they'll be operational in the next couple of months. We have RTChar Ireland also based in the northwest here, and they're running an American piece of kit, producing biochar from forestry residue. We have Origin Biochar, which produce a high quality animal feed grade biochar based in Northern Ireland, and they're also the sales agent for Biomass pyrolysis units. We have a number of other pyrolysis plants in development, and then of course we have the lab scale to assist in sort of servicing the bioeconomy and developing the biochar value chains. So Lignans have lab scale capabilities there. So if you want to test a feedstock and characterize your resultant biochar, they would be able to offer that service for you commercially. So there's a growing number of pyrolysis plants. Even at the farm scale, there's a number of plants in development. And so our hope is that it becomes more affordable over time. Pyrolysis plants can be quite expensive for the ones that have all the bells and whistles. So I think, as our project video showed, we need them at the farm scale, simple flame cap type devices, right up to medium sort of rural plants that could be integrated into heat networks and may be able to provide carbon neutral or carbon negative district or process heat, which I think is, as a proposition, is incredibly exciting. And then we have it all the way up to the industrial plants that are able to deal with large throughputs and be able to process a lot of biomass material. And then just follow up on Bernard's point, I suppose, just with regards to rushes and availability of feedstock. So originally our project partners, our current lead project partners are the University of Grassland Science in Kassel in Germany. And so originally they had set out about looking to see if they could valorize low value conservation grassland management material. So material that's part of SACs or SPAs that are cut late in the season to allow the most benefit to biodiversity, but they still needed management. Otherwise you end up with tussocks and land that isn't suitable. Now the material, when it's cut that late in the season, it's of little to no nutritional value. It's a little use to a biogas plant operator. And so what they set about was a way of cutting it, washing it at about 40 degrees Celsius to wash out some of the mineral content before putting it through a screw press, pelletizing it and drying it, which then could be used as a combustion fuel or as a source of biochar feedstock. And so there's any amount of that material out there that does not compete with land resources, with traditional crops that we need to manage or that we pay to manage, that lend itself extremely well to biochar production. So we'll be keen to see further development of that within the Irish context, absolutely.
And I also believe Dauman here, they are also constructing and commissioning a continuous throughput pyrolysis as well. We only have a couple of minutes left, and we have 3 questions left for now. If there's no time for finishing any of the one of the questions, we will follow up by email. But the next question is addressed to George Bishop here. Maurice Ryan is asking, does this BioEra framework consider the use of biomass in CHP?
No, so the BioEra framework, we just consider feedstock acquisition, so just producing of the feedstock. So it wouldn't include the use or end of life, like to CHP. But sending to CHP is one of the examples where credits coming from that use and end of life, like to CHP, might offset some of these burdens upstream. For example, substituting out this heat or electricity fossil from the CHP. So definitely comes in later, but within the BioEra framework itself, it's not included.
Thank you, George. So Rio here has a question as well, and I suppose it's for everybody here that is in relation with pyrolysis plant. So he's asking, what is the typical yield of bio-oil and biochar? What is more profitable in terms of economics? And what about oil yield and purity? Same with biochar yield and purity. So I don't know if there's any of our pyrolysis experts that would like to answer this question.
I can take it if you like.
Go ahead.
So
Thank you.
this kind of comes down to material type, how it's pre-processed, how it enters the reactor, and it also comes down to the processing temperatures. So if you process it fast, you get more oil. If you process it slow, you get more char. And then depending on the temperature, you can produce, kind of a larger volume of gas as well. So it's a difficult question to answer without knowing at what conditions the reactor is set up. But for most, so first, I suppose it's important to differentiate between a kind of combustion-based pyrolysis reactor. So there are kind of pyrolysis boilers, which are essentially they're restricted. You restrict the airflow and you partially burn the biomass, and that results in a amount of char being left in the reactor, and that's how you produce your biochar. There are other methods that don't do that, and that are not based on combustion, and you can get higher yields from them because they're more controllable. So in terms of char yield, it seems to be somewhere around kind of 17 to 25% on a dry matter basis. So you get about, say, 20% average of char for every ton of dry material that you put into your machine, and the oil will be slightly less. It's probably, the oil is very similar. It'll be kind of 20-25%. So, and in terms of the economics, well, this is kind of to be seen because the oil contains so many different compounds. It really does depend on what the market is for those compounds. And at the moment, like the economics for biochar, it's kind of, we need adoption first before we know what the value is going to be. So we need more people to use it, and then the market economics will take over. So at the moment, an awful lot of production processes are based around cost of production plus, a profit of some sort. So yeah, it's a very tricky question. It's probably too early a question to answer. But,
thank you, Robert. Perhaps we could put you two in contact and have a further conversation on this.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. I believe we have run out of time. We only have one question left. I can free you all if you want, but I'm going to address this question because this is here for Bernard. And now that we have his presence here, yeah, I suppose it will be good for us to listen to his answer, and perhaps there's other people interested in the answer. So Rubina from Aglan asks Bernard, you raised the possibility for biochar to be included in agri-environment schemes such as acres. So how much potential is there for farmers to be rewarded for utilizing biochar in ways that you mentioned? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, where do you start with that? Because there's so many opportunities. I mean, if you're producing it yourself, just take a simple version. You down here, which I live here in the west, so I'm more or less focused on what's going on down here. Farmers got bales of rushes and they want to turn them into biochar. Well, maybe as an acre scheme that we would have had, you get so much money for planting so many trees, maybe through some like a co-op structure and part of the Irish Biochar Co-op, that you would have a credit system where a farmer says it got 20 bales and then it goes into a plant and there's so much biochar produced with that to get paid for the biochar itself. Further downstream then, I mean, the emissions reduction, which is will require a lot more research, you know, to how would you give somebody money for that? Like, how do you quantify that if they added to their slurry? We have some data, but it would need more. But the benefits then are also just like the way farmers now are incorporating clover into their fields to reduce nitrogen. You're going to get better value out of your slurry or your manure, your farmyard manure if you add biochar to it. So the benefits, some of them aren't quite measurable, but they can be seen through less fertilizer inputs. So I mean, if you want to come back to me on that question, we could follow it up in an email. Because it's such a broad question. You could go on for half an hour talking about that.
We could put you two in contact, no problem. Thank you, Bernard, and thank you all the other guests today for being with us and sharing all this knowledge around biochar. And thank you all for listening to InformBio Outputs. And you can follow us in any of our social media. You can go into our webpage for more details, and of course, consult the web pages of these other two projects because they also have a lot of details and interesting outputs of their projects. So thank you very much. Have a nice day and enjoy the rest of the Bioeconomy Ireland week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carmen. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Carmen. Bye.
You.
Bye, all of you.